What's up, guys? My name is Zach Miller, and today we are talking about camera basics, part 2. So in the last camera basics video, we talked about shutter speed and how that affects our image as far as the exposure is concerned and freezing motion is concerned. Today, we're talking about aperture. So simply put, aperture, or the f-stop, is how large of an opening that your lens has to let light into the sensor. So a smaller opening in your lens will allow your lens to take in less light, but more of your image will be in focus or have less depth of field. So a larger aperture or opening in your lens will allow you to have less of your image in focus, but take in more light, causing more depth of field. First off, what is depth of field anyway? If you're looking at me right now, you can see that I'm in focus, but the wall behind me that could have some sharp detail on the pattern is actually falling off and is kind of blurry, which is putting more focus on me as the subject in the video. The same effect is used for photography. A blurrier background is a greater depth of field. Another word that is commonly used for this but isn't actually the same exact thing is bokeh. Bokeh is whenever the background is really blurry and has like this bright effect to it, and there's just something about it that's different. So a lot of people get this confused in the beginning. A large aperture, or f-stop, is actually indicated by a smaller number, like f1.8 or f2.8. And this is the end of the spectrum that will allow you to have a more shallow depth of field. So a small aperture is actually represented by a larger number, such as f9, f10, f22. And this actually results in a larger depth of field, which means not as shallow, so to speak. It gets real confusing, but just know, large means small and small means large. That works, right? So what is depth of field anyway? The dictionary defines depth of field as the distance between the nearest and the furthest objects, a given image judged to be in focus in a camera. Another way to look at depth of field would be the amount of bokeh, or blur in the background as opposed to the foreground, as opposed to the sharpness of the foreground. So you can't find f1.8 on your camera. Is it broke? Do you need to take the battery out? What's wrong? This setting depends strictly on your lens. Most kit lenses, the ones that come with your camera, have what we call a variable aperture. An example of this would be f3.5/5.6. This means that the largest aperture value available on your lens depends on if you are zoomed in or not. I don't recommend buying these lenses because when shooting in manual mode, now your exposure changes because your lens isn't allowed to go down as far as it was before. They are great for learning if they just came with the camera, and it'll buy you some time to figure things out. So back to not being able to find f1.8. So the reason you can't find this setting on your lens is that every lens has a number that it can reach, most of which somewhere ending on the scale of f22, but some actually end around f16. So when you purchase a lens, for example, the lens I'm using right now is a 16 to 35 millimeter f2.8. That means that you can go all the way down to f2.8 on this lens, which means I can't go to f1.8 on this lens because it's simply not available. All right. Oh God, that was a mouthful. So, when do we use a small aperture? Keep in mind that a small aperture is a larger f-stop number. We want to use a number between f3.5 to 4.5 when we photograph a group of people. The reason for this is so that everybody is in focus. There's nothing worse than a shot where one person's in focus and the other isn't, and it was not for a creative purpose, it was just because they didn't get the shot right. So in this image, I wanted the entire scene to be in focus, so I shot at f9. All right, so a large aperture. When do we use that? That's the one that everybody likes. As opposed to the previous example, a large aperture is represented by a smaller f number. That means that less of your image will be in focus, causing a greater depth of field, as mentioned before. This is also compressed or exaggerated with longer focal lengths, but we'll get into that later. In this example, we wanted to photograph a single model and blur out distracting elements of the photo. So this can be used as a creative effect or to eliminate distracting elements of a photo. In this image, I shot at a larger aperture, smaller number, with a focal length of 200 millimeters. at f2.8. Notice the bokeh and the blurred out elements of the photo. We made it. We made it through Aperture. So proud of you. On to the next video.